Hey, this is John Leon Guerrero. Our guest today is Max Martini. He's a stage and screen actor, writer, and director whose work is far more vast than you probably realize, and that's quite a bit. He played Corporal Fred Henderson in Saving Private Ryan, and he played a Navy SEAL in Captain Phillips, so he shared the screen with Tom Hanks twice. He played First Sergeant Sid Wojo in The Great Raid, and Master Sergeant Mac Gerhardt in one of my favorite TV shows ever, The Unit, which was created by David Mamet and explored the lives and bond of a top-secret Army Special Ops unit. Even in an ensemble of top-tier actors playing complicated characters, Max built a character who was committed, dark, and fascinating, and he did it with masterful subtlety. It was a great show, very special. He was brilliant in it, and if you don't already know it, you should get to know it. He tends to get cast as the brooding tough guy, and he's done a great job of it in shows like CSI, 24, Numbers, Criminal Minds, Hawaii Five-0, and Walker, Texas Ranger. Seriously, if there's a TV show that ever needs a masculine character who's central to the story, Max is on the short list. He may have learned that projection of authority from his mother. She was a private investigator and a parole officer. But Max was certainly influenced by his father, who was a sculptor and an artist. When he chose his educational path, Max has a Bachelor of Fine Arts in Painting and Sculpture from the School of Visual Arts in Manhattan. Max sat down with Pete and Scott to talk about how he explores and portrays the varying and complex stories of our heroes in and outside of the service in his new film, Sergeant Will Gardner. He wrote, directed, and stars in the film about a disabled Iraq War veteran who's suffering from traumatic brain injury and PTSD from his time in combat. In the midst of a really tough series of personal tragedies, he goes on a cross-country journey on his motorcycle to reconnect with himself and to reassemble his life and his family. And Max is giving 30% of the film's profits to charities that benefit veterans: Higher Ground USA, Warrior's Heart, and the Gary Sinise Foundation. He also does a lot of work to call attention to our need to reform what's broken about the VA. Now, obviously, if you listen to the Break It Down show, you care about causes like these too. So I'm going to ask you to do two things. First, support the charities you care about by donating some money and keep them going, and volunteer your time and your work. We support Save the Brave, and you can too. You can find them at savethebrave.org. And the SEAL Veterans Foundation, and you can read about what they do at sealveteransfoundation.org. In fact, Pete is doing the Coronado SEAL Memorial Swim on Saturday, September 21st, to benefit the families of naval special warfare operators who've made the ultimate sacrifice to defend our freedom. These organizations get our support, and we'd love it if you support them too. Second thing I'm going to ask is even easier. Support the Break It Down show with a 5-star rating and a short review, like, "These guys are dope, and they do dope shit." See? Easy. You don't have to write a screenplay like Max, just a few words, and click on that 5-star. Anyway, here he is, one of my very favorite actors, and our special guest today, joining Scott and Pete. He is a bad motherfucker. Here is Max Martini.
How you doing? This is Max Martini, and you're listening to the Break It Down show.
Yeah, Max Martini's on the show with us. We're going to talk about his latest project. I have Scott Huesing in-house here doing the co-hosting with me. So, as always, it's a pleasure to have Scott on the show. And I think we've got to give a shout-out to Jason Piccolo because he gets an associate producer credit for setting this one up.
Absolutely. Yeah, Jason's the man. I think he gets the credit for knowing more people than me. And his pod is great. And on today's show, we're going to be talking with Max, his latest film, Sergeant Will Gardner, which is just crushing it. Max is going to tell us a little about that. And he's down sweating his balls off in Louisiana, battling the bayou down there. So, hey, Max, thanks for coming on the show. Glad to have you, brother.
Thanks, buddy. I could use a mister. I've had swamp ass for about 4 months, and I'm just miserable. Off to a good start. There you go.
That's a great title for this show. Let's call this show Swamp Ass.
Yeah.
Max Martini. Yes. He quickly devolves into high school mentality.
Yes. But where you're at in the South, that whole Fort Polk is also the same way. Like, that's just a multi-shirt day. And then your shirts never really dry out because even in the dryer, they're still kind of wet.
The minute you leave your apartment, you're in a wall of hot wet. And it's
hard to smell nice down there.
That's right. That's right. But the beer is flowing, and so that's the saving grace.
So is New Orleans a happy place for you, or is it a workplace when you're there? Hey, this is Pete. Real quick, I just want to let you guys know we are proud to announce our official support of Save the Brave, a certified nonprofit 501c3 with a charter of helping veterans with post-traumatic stress. Here's how you can help. Go to savethebrave.com, click on the link on the website, and my recommendation is this. Subscribe. Give them $20 a month. You've got subscriptions that you can turn off right now that you're not using that are $20 a month. Swap that out. Get involved. Let's help these folks out. So is New Orleans a happy place for you, or is it a workplace when you're there?
Well, it's a workplace, but I've managed to get out, and there's some, look, the upside is that there's amazing restaurants. The food's just awesome, and the music has been really cool, man. I mean, I don't get this in Los Angeles, and so I'm getting a taste of the New Orleans while I'm here.
Well, what's cool about your career, Mac, we're both veterans and we have a lot of veterans on the program, but you're so tied to the veteran community because of all the amazing work you've done in film and TV, from amazing films like Saving Private Ryan, and just, I mean, the list goes on. We'd spend the whole show just giving your credit list if we did that. But I think what's cool about having you on is you're another one of those people in the entertainment space that is really waving the flag and really respecting and promoting what veterans do, and not just playing one on TV, but your actions in service to our nation's veteran really sets you apart. How did you get connected with that outside of the film and TV industry? What drew you to what you do with our veteran community?
That's a really good question. I come somewhat from a law enforcement military family, and I say somewhat because not everyone served, but I do have military and law enforcement on my mom's side. My dad was in the military, but he's from Italy. He was in the Italian Navy. I didn't really develop sort of, I would say, an intense appreciation for what our soldiers do for this country until I did Saving Private Ryan. And that movie, I went into it as an actor, young guy without, this is going back a couple decades, but without really a political point of view, an understanding of the necessity of our warriors. And I think after having done that film and had an opportunity to converse with the World War II vets that I met, as a result of that, it just triggered something in my mind and in my being. And I dug deep, and as a result, man, I don't know, there's something about me where people keep choosing me to play in these military roles. My base of friends now is largely military, and I think it's likely just because I'm so passionate now about what our military provides this country. And so that when I tackle something like 13 Hours or something like Captain Phillips or something like Private Ryan or The Unit, I mean, I've done so many military projects that I really do commit to making it as real as humanly possible.
Well, what would you say that one thing from your experience in film and TV about learning about the military that the public should know coming through your perspective?
Well, look, I mean, like I said, I think early on I started to learn the value of our military. And then because most of these movies were largely combat films, I started to get the tactics down. I'm a big gun guy, so I love getting out and shooting, and, I love just the tactical work. I love CQB. All that stuff really excites me. So not only do I do it on screen, but I do it in my spare time, and then we'll get into talking about Sergeant Will Gardner, but that was it was just a different layer, a different level of understanding, because it's one thing to pick up a weapon and figure out how to move naturally with a weapon and work in certain situations and adapt, but to really understand the realities of soldiers post-combat, and I never will, but to try was a whole other, virtually impossible feat, man. I mean, I was I'm very fortunate in that when I was preparing for Will Gardner, I have a lot of friends, all, like I said, so many friends, but a lot of friends that have served and come back with injuries, both emotional and physical. So they were very collaborative and willing to share their experiences. But as were, many of my social media friends. I mean, so many people came forward and said, "Hey, if you need advice, if you want me, jump on the phone with me. Like, let me share what I'm going through with you," because it's a story that generally is told in this kind of way where you end up sitting through 2 hours of somebody suffering, and it's hard to digest. And what I wanted to do was make a different kind of story about it was something that inspired hope and healing. And I think because of that intention, so much of the veteran community came forward and offered their help, because I think it's a valuable approach.
I think you've gone beyond what some call like a military groupie to being accepted and to really get those stories. And let's just cut through it. I mean, we're talking about post-traumatic stress and what our warrior community deal with when they get back. And I think that's the main theme of Sergeant Will Gardner. Was, I don't want to say vastly different from the work you've done, but you really nailed it in this film and capturing that raw emotional aspect of what our veteran community are dealing with. And I'm not just talking about Iraq and Afghanistan vets. I'm talking about every generation of warfighter in this country that has never had guys like you who are willing to strap it on and really portray that in such a visceral sense. So tell us a little bit about Sergeant Will Gardner, why you went into this project and what the film's about first.
Yeah, I mean, there's a just to quickly add to what you were saying, there's a, in terms of the different wars, but there's one of my favorite scenes in the movie is with a Vietnam vet, and we still are dealing with the veterans from that war and their issues. I mean, so many are still homeless today. So what I wanted to do was to touch on homelessness in the veteran community, to touch on PTS, to touch on TBI, but also to make the story, to give it levity, to add some humor. There's kind of a goofy storyline that I think it's hilarious, and I think it makes the movie, like I said, digestible. But my intention was to, like I said, create a film that inspires hope, that inspires healing, that, hopefully is an effort to remove this notion that if you come forward and ask for help, you'll be stigmatized or that it's a show of weakness, which it's not. And to, inspire the community that supports veterans to not just say, I'm a supporter, to actually get out and get your hands dirty and help the veteran community and do something. Our film supports 3 charities I'll get into that to telling you who they are and what they're doing. But I really wanted this to be a call to action, and I think it's successful in doing that. I mean, like you said, I've had the veteran community has just embraced this in such a magnificent way, and it was on Netflix and it was trending, and it's really gaining momentum and very touching that it's having this kind of success.
When you read about the movie online, and everybody should go and take a look at it. I mean, you got all-star players in this thing. Gary Sinise, we'll just say that name right there and leave it there. But you're talking about a story of PTS. I say PTSD because I have it, and I don't know when I'm going to get better. I have a disorder that maybe at some point I won't have the responses that I have, but you also have to mix in TBI, and it's easy to see a person who's missing a limb and say that person's missing a limb and do something kind for them. But when you have a cocktail of TBI and PTS, like if you could see me walk with those things, you'd be like, oh, that guy really is screwed up. He's going to be struggling with these injuries. It's like almost like a limp that you have, but it's your brain. So like for me, there were things that would make me unnecessarily angry. I had a problem with hypervigilance, all of these things. And my responses were out of whack for reality. And I could only see that as people reflected back my responses to me, that I was acting in a way that wasn't normal. And it took a lot for me to accept all of that stuff. So, and I know you talk to people to kind of grab these things. How do you use these kinds of stories to show, in a respectful way, the veterans' struggle without, making it into a cartoon character or something that it's not?
That's one of the other intentions behind this film was to show, and these were all puzzles that, I had to solve along the way, but I wanted to show a war veteran at his lowest, but still keep him a hero and still have him walk tall and still have him not only in this movie and, begin the healing process for himself, but also take on a mission to help, heal his brothers and sisters that had fought, and lead by example, so, because I think that's important too, This story was inspired by a relationship that I started with an Army Ranger that I met in Iraq, and just a really great guy, big, strapping, kind of the epitome of an Army Ranger. And we started communicating while he was in combat, and he had survived 2 IEDs.
Oh, wow.
The second IED, he was the only survivor. And by email started using me as a sounding board, and I didn't have many answers for him, but he was saying, like yourself, he was having anger issues. He was suffering from sleep deprivation. He was like all things that were symptomatic of PTS and TBI. But he was very scared to come forward and ask for help because he didn't want to be sent to the rear. He didn't want to be ridiculed. He didn't, he didn't want to. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And when he got home, it just got worse, man. And he started fighting. He lost his marriage. He fell homeless. So it was really these communications that made me go, look, I've got this massive audience. I'm going to do something and try to help all these returning servicemen, women that are dealing with the same issues. And so this is an effort to do that. You go, he was experiencing it all. I mean, in a matter of such a short period of time, was homeless and having all these other things that were symptomatic of these ailments.
So let me ask you a question from your perspective in the industry. Do you think there's ever going to be a time where we make a film that isn't about the poor, downtrodden, homeless vet who's all boozy, drugged out, riding a motorcycle, fucks his wife over, leaves his wife, and we make a movie about a guy that has had multiple combat tours, becomes a successful businessman, entrepreneur, does everything right? Is there a market for that in Hollywood?
I think there's totally a market for that. I think Hollywood needs to get behind the veteran community in a big way, and I'm sort of ashamed that it hasn't. I was having a discussion with my producing partner yesterday. I said, here's the thing is that, like my world, the Hollywood world, has such an impact and such an influence globally, that when there's a natural disaster, they get together and they do a tele-fundraising event for all the people that were, victim to a hurricane, victim to the, and they put together and they raise millions and millions of fucking dollars. And they, and they have the eyes and ears of everybody in the world. And, but they have not done this for the veterans, and it's shameful. It's you when you look at the numbers, there's like, and I have a card at the end of my movie, and I'm blanking on what they are, but I'm gonna guesstimate right now that there's 50 to 60,000 homeless veterans on the streets of America on any given night. There have been over 300,000 cases of combat-related traumatic brain injuries. 22 veterans a day taking their lives. In 2015, there was an Inspector General's report that stated that over 300,000 veterans had died awaiting pending healthcare claims. I mean, it's really bad.
That is absolutely reality, and that's the world that Pete and I live in. These aren't numbers; these aren't statistics. These are our friends, our fellow warriors, our family members.
Yeah,
these are people we know on an intimate, personal basis. And I think you really nailed that. And to get guys like you in Hollywood to be advocates for that, and there's so many of them out there. And again, 1 Degree of Separation, good friend of me and Pete is Billy Ray, who's been on the show, Captain Phillips, which you starred in. So when you talk about this community in Hollywood, there are people out there that are willing to raise the banner, speak up, step up, and do what you're doing, man. And I got to tell you, I'm proud of you for doing that, because it's vital to share that message. And I'd ask you, how do we continue to propagate that message?
Well, I mean, are you talking about in terms of supporting my film, or in terms of doing other things?
I think the film absolutely does it in a certain context, but how do you spread that message on a broader scale to gain interest in the media and entertainment field to share more of these stories?
It's a great question. I'm really trying to start something in Hollywood. It's not only are we having, as in my mind, we need to do more for veterans within my community, but Hollywood isn't notorious for giving back, so there really haven't been a lot of films. I actually can't think of one that has, given a percentage to charity. So, look, I mean, it's raising awareness. It's starting a conversation. It's continuing a conversation. It's trying to influence political leaders and legislature. I mean, if we put so much money into training our soldiers, into turning them into warriors, if we put the same amount of money into their exit strategy, we wouldn't have these kinds of numbers, So we need to fix what's wrong. We need to fix the system and then just keep it that way, But look, to answer your question, I don't know what we can do other than rally support, and that's what I'm trying to do. It's like we had $2.5 million to make my movie, which in my world is nothing. And look at the success that it's having, and it's we're still a bit of a ways away from our profit margin, but it's without a major theatrical release, without some big studio behind it, without some big names sort of pushing us forward, we're having a tremendous impact on the veteran community, and the people that are helping me get this message out are really like guys, I get 20, 30, 40 direct messages a day since this movie released from people saying, bless you for what you're doing. I went through this program at one of your charities. It changed my life. It gave my wife her husband back. It gave my daughter her father back. Thank you for supporting these organizations. Thank you.
Man, dude, you're lighting candles in my church, Max, because I got chills, because you couldn't stand on a stage in Hollywood and receive any type of faux statue or award that is any more validating than receiving a message from a Gold Star family member or a fellow veteran that is so appreciative of what you do and what you've done with this movie, Sergeant Will Gardner, to showcase and highlight what it is that these warriors go through in combat and then come home to and deal with, I hate to use that term, like hidden wounds, but it's cliche, but that's the reality. And those types of accolades from everyday, ordinary people that just watched your film, and that's got to be immensely gratifying. I mean, how does it make you feel?
I have trouble holding it together.
How many times have you cried?
Nobody.
You've opened up a direct message from the wife or a soldier. Tell me about it.
I can't even tell. One of I got a message from somebody that had gone through one of the charities is called Warriors Heart, and this gentleman went through their program and sent me this beautiful message about how it saved him. And then his wife found me at the facility somehow, I don't know how she knew that I was going. She may have had it. Well, obviously they had a connection because he went there, but somebody had mentioned that I was going to be out there, and she came out with her kids to meet me. My producing partner and I had to pull over off the side of the road on the way out because we lost it. I mean, I can't even talk about it now.
Let me ask you this then, to give you a break for a second. And by the way, I cry on this show all the time. So I
try crying with swamp ass.
I cry at Geico commercials.
I cried twice at 3 shows in Missoula. And so it happens all the time. How often does that happen, though, in other movies, other projects, where you're just, something's broken open in you and you cry, you're super emotional? Something like that must happen, right? Hey, this is P.A. Turner from Lions Rock Productions. We create podcasts around here. And if you, your brand, or your company want to figure out how to do a podcast, just talk to me. I'll give you the advice on the right gear, the best plan, and show you how to take a podcast that makes sense for you, that's sustainable, that's scalable, and fun. Hit me up at pete@breakitdownshow.com. Let me help. I want to hear about it. How often does that happen, though, in other movies, other projects, where you're just, something's broken open in you and you cry, you're super emotional? Something like that must happen, right?
Never. Here's what I've had a really interesting road in this business, and that, because I've been part of the retelling of these historical events, 13 hours for one,
Yeah.
Just a story that had to get out there, and and was very closely lifted, from the book that the contractors that survived it wrote. But it elevates what I'm doing, because, and I say this, when I say this, I'm saying it because I feel so fortunate to be part of these films in particular. When I went to Iraq and Afghanistan, I went over twice, and I orchestrated these trips, to the Middle East, and it was kind of I didn't realize it, but I began to realize the importance of the retelling of these events, and how important it is that we tell them as truthfully and as honestly and as realistically as possible, because you guys this is how it's communicated to the public, what you're doing, and so many soldiers have come up to me. I've had guys come up to me and say, hey, I watched the unit, for 2 seasons and then went and enlisted. That's why I enlisted in the military, or your show got me through my entire, tour in Afghanistan, or it just gave me a break from the grind. And you go, God, the USO is doing such an incredible thing for our military, But to have that level of appreciation from you guys it's very rewarding. And quite honestly, look, I mean, as an actor, I try to kind of mix it up and do other things, but I love playing soldiers so much, and I love just kind of honoring the sacrifices that you guys are making on screen for everybody to see. It's important.
When you look at the modern tales, I think about Jarhead as sort of being the proto modern war story, where not a whole lot happened in the Gulf War, and so not a whole lot happens in the movie, and it's kind of hard to sit there. But now we're in this new style of telling it, and it's right away. It's not like the World War II movies that first came out, and it was like, I don't know, farcical with their fantasy, right? But we really get to get gritty now because we have the tales right now. Are you a modern historian?
Well, I haven't even, I've never even looked at what I'm doing that way, but I guess I'm part of some sort of, I don't know. I mean, it seems like the combat movies that you see now are lifted from actual, battles. So maybe I'm a part of that movement. I don't know, but.
Well, I will answer that question. Story is historical. Own it, brother. You are absolutely part of the voice. And I've said this 1,000 times. You don't have to have been in the military to own the words like service and sacrifice. It's a mantra of mine, and you're doing it, man. And you need to own that. I love it that you're doing that. And you shouldn't have any apprehension doing that, because in your medium, with your experience and your connections, you absolutely are telling history. And I think that one of the biggest platforms is absolutely in Hollywood, absolutely on the big screen, absolutely on Netflix. You are crushing it, brother.
Yeah, thanks, bro. For me, it's just staying humble, but and doing something that that's look. I mean, this is film is it's a medium that really can create some significant changes in the world, if it's used properly. So I've set out. I'm going to make it my mission to get some, to assist these foundations that I chose to support, that that I think are doing amazing work, and then expand. I mean, Gary Sinise is such a, oh my God. I mean, there's just nobody. I've never met anybody like him. He's such a force in the veteran community. He's so well respected in my business. He's amazing in my movie, and nobody does more for veterans than he does. And I've really sort of set him, as my mentor, because he's given his life to it, and he's so patriotic.
Yeah, I tell you what, brother, if you're in LA on Sunday, August 25th at Temple Bond Yacht, Gary's going to be there. I'm going to be there. Pete's going to be there. We can all link up and crush it.
You know what? Let's talk about that after the show, and let me make a note and see if I can make myself free. That'd be fun.
While you're making your note, Max, let me tee up and kind of transition us to the charities. But first, I want to pay the bills, because I've been trying to understand something, and I think you'll get what I'm going after here. I've been trying to understand this desire that a lot of us have to redefine patriotism, and saying things like isms are all bad. And I don't understand it. So I'm trying to understand what people in general, how do you define patriotism? Where do you put it? Like, is it a good thing? Is it a bad thing? I can accept that you can be too much of a homer and really love your country, and that can be a lot. But also the self-loathing side of it, where like we look at people like that with disdain. Where would you put yourself on that spectrum? And how do you define patriotism?
I have traveled to so many different countries, and not sort of touchdown in airports, but like I've worked in different countries and spent 3-4 months at a time in different countries. And in all of the third world countries to, exotic vacation destinations, everywhere that I've gone, at the end of that stretch, I've always wanted to come home. And I think that having kids was the one thing in my life that made me immensely patriotic, because this country is, aside from what flaws it might have, or what, if you want to nitpick of the things that aren't perfect, this is the best country in the world. It's the freest country in the world. It's the safest country in the world. To have, when I became father, I became overly protective and almost paranoid about the safety of my kids. And that drove my patriotism. It drove my appreciation for the military. It drove my appreciation for first responders and our law enforcement. And so where do I stand? Where do I fit in? I mean, I'm at the top of the list. I've got American flag tattooed all over my body.
Motivation. Where are those tattoos? The lady listeners want to know, Max Martini. I know you're married.
I got a lot of flag on my skin. I'm up there, brother, and it's and I said this at the beginning of the show. My dad is from Italy. My father was born in Rome. I have a huge family in Rome. I'm a dual citizen. I speak Italian.
You're like are you a tri-citizen or dual citizen?
Well, I'm not sure that it's legal, but I do carry 3 passports. Let's not spread it around. I have my American by birth. I have my Italian citizenship through my dad, and my mother remarried an actor director, actually, which is how I sort of, got a taste of Hollywood. But he had a property in Canada growing up. And so as a result of being, spending enough time in Canada on this property, we became landed immigrants and then got a Canadian citizenship. So I got three.
Well, you're in good company, because Pizza Spy, and we've had Dan Gabriel and so many other legitimate spies on. So, if you're still under, contract, that's acceptable. But to canvas so much of the world and then to be tied into the veteran community, I mean, it's absolutely, you've led a remarkable career. And with Sergeant Will Gardner coming out and highlighting all that, what are you doing in Louisiana right now, and what's next for you, and how are you going to continue to do what you're doing?
Well, you know what, really quickly, can I backtrack, and can I just mention a little bit about these charities? So Gary Sinise's foundation is one of the charities that we're giving to. And for those of you that aren't aware of everything that he's doing for the veteran community, he, not only do they play and entertain through his Lieutenant Dan band for the troops, but he's building and he's outfitting homes for veterans that are disabled. Recently, not too long ago, I want to say he took over 1,000 Gold Star women and their families to Disneyland. He's just constantly doing something for veterans, but his community is building homes, or his foundation's building homes and giving them away, and it's spectacular. One of the other charities is called Higher Ground USA.